Welcome everyone. Today we will discuss what would have happened if the Megali succeeded. Now, as a bit of historical context, the Megali as a concept was created in 1844 by the Greek Prime Minister Ioannis Koletas. It stated that the Greek people should have a homeland comprising of all the regions in the Balkans and Anatolia that were historically inhabited by Greeks. Greece is historically and culturally one of the richest nations in the world and is considered the father of the Western civilization. Now, ever since the fall of the Western Roman Empire, a part of it continued in the east called the Byzantine Empire, which was the Roman Empire with an unmistakable Greek character. They fought many strong foes, such as the Huns, Sasanians, Bulgarians, Rus, the Islamic Caliphates, Egyptians, Normans, Crusaders, and of course the Seljuks. These Seljuks would conquer Anatolia and would pave the way for the Ottomans, who would deal the killing blow to the Byzantines by taking Constantinople in 1453, ending the Roman Empire once and for all. Following this, the Greeks would spend centuries under Ottoman rule, during which they would have to face Islamic taxation and would have to send their kids to Constantinople to become a part of the Sultan's circle, either as janissaries or as his concubines. But it wasn't all bad, as they were granted special privileges as priests, sailors, and businessmen, but it can't really be considered a high point for them. Greece lagged behind in Ottoman rule while the rest of Europe walked the road of progress. In the late 1700s, the Age of Enlightenment started amongst the Greeks. This was inspired by the ideas of the French Revolution and Catherine the Great's claims that Christian revolution would cause the liberation of the Balkans from Ottoman rule. The Greeks would launch a number of uprisings, and on the 21st of February 1821, the Greek War of Independence would start. The war would see massacres on both sides and the interference of Muhammad Ali and the great powers, till on the 3rd of February 1831, Greece gained independence. Originally, it was supposed to be a republic, but then it became a kingdom under George of Bavaria. Greece only made up about one-fourth of all the lands inhabited by Greeks. To compensate them, the British would give the Greeks the Ionian Islands and Corfu, but Greece wasn't really independent and was more or less a protectorate of the great powers, due to which they remained neutral in the Crimean War and in 1878. In 1897, a revolt started on the island of Crete demanding integration into Greece. This caused a war between the Greeks and the Ottomans. The war was militarily a failure, but diplomatically, Greece managed to gain Epirus and Thessaly, while Crete also joined later on. In 1910, Greece, Bulgaria, Serbia, and Montenegro formed the Balkan League against the Ottomans, and in 1911, the Italo-Turkish War started. Taking advantage of Ottoman weakness, the Balkan League declared war on them in 1912, starting the First Balkan War. The Balkan League would kick the Turks out of most of the Balkans and would win. But Bulgaria, unhappy with what they got and wanting more, declared war on Serbia, starting the Second Balkan War, in which all of Bulgaria's neighbors ganged up on them. In 1914, the Great War would start, where Greece would remain neutral. The king, King Constantine I, favored the Central Powers, due to him being the brother-in-law of Kaiser Wilhelm II, while the Prime Minister, Eleftheros Venizelos, favored the Entente. This caused a national schism and brief civil war, till in 1917, Venizelos won, and Greece joined the Entente. Initially, they'd get bogged down, but soon they'd defeat Bulgaria, resulting in their surrender, due to which the Ottomans also surrendered. When the war ended, Greece was to receive most of their claimed lands, but the Turks, under Mustafa Kemal, fought the Greeks and the Entente for their independence. This culminated in the Battle of Izmir, where the Turks won, resulting in their victory in the war. This was the spiritual end of the Megali, and Greece would never see the same level of greatness ever again. But what if they did? Today we will discuss that, but before starting the scenario, I would appreciate it if you would subscribe to the channel, as it would help me create more alternate history scenarios just like this. But without any further ado, let's start the scenario. We need to go back to 1821, when the War of Independence started. We will have Muhammad Ali not help the Ottomans and instead secure his hold over Egypt. This would result in the rebels and partisans to be more successful, but it would still require the interference of the great powers for the Greeks to secure their independence. In the peace deal, the great powers would be much more sympathetic to the Greek cause, resulting in them having Thessaly and Epirus alongside what they gained in our own timeline. Internally, Greece wouldn't become a monarchy. Instead, they'd become a republic under Ioannis Kapodistrias, who is sometimes referred to as the father of modern Greece. Capodistrias was the man who made Switzerland what it was, and was also the foreign minister of the Russian Empire from 1816 to 1822. He became the governor of Greece in our own timeline, but was soon assassinated, due to which the great powers turned Greece into a kingdom. Here we will prevent his assassination. This would result in Greece to stay as a republic. At the start, Greece would be extremely poor and backwards compared to the rest of Europe. Capodistrias, after approval from the National Assembly, would become dictator for 7 years, and would embark on a transformative path known as the Hellenic Revival. The plan would see small-scale industrialization, agricultural reforms, monetary changes, and greater centralization of the state. The agricultural reforms would see the redistribution of land and cultivation of crops like cotton and silk. This would improve the economy, and Greece would slowly adopt more modern farming techniques, while the cash crops would be sold to the rest of Europe. The money obtained would be used to improve the infrastructure of Greece, creating ports and improving the cities. This money would be in the form of a new currency known as the phoenix. This currency would symbolize the rebirth of the Greek civilization, as the phoenix symbolizes rebirth and revival. After successful agricultural practices, Greece would embark on a small-scale industrialization effort. Collective cities such as Athens, Nafplion, Kalamata, Patras, Lamia, Volos, and Sparta would see industrialization, with factories opening up in those cities to produce cheap and qualitative goods. Finally, this would result in greater centralization of the state, as Capodistrias works day and night to ensure that even the most remote parts of the country get to enjoy this Hellenic revival. The 7-year dictatorship would end in 1836, and by the end, Greece would have been transformed into a modern nation-state with a robust economy and industry. Before leaving office, Capodistrias would manage to negotiate the sale of the Ionian Islands and Corfu, the latter of which was his birthplace, with Britain. They would sell the islands, and Capodistrias would leave office afterwards, leaving Greece in capable hands while he retires to Corfu, being remembered as the man who took Greece into the modern era. After him, his policies would be continued, with Greece slowly becoming more and more wealthy. In the 1840s, Greece would continue normally and would largely be unaffected by the revolutions of 1848, but they would fund one in the Ottoman Empire, leading to a small-scale revolt breaking out in Thessaloniki, which unfortunately would fail. Greece would ignore this loss and would continue forward. As the 1850s start, Greece would start investing in its military, buying naval ships from Britain and seeking help in training their troops from Prussia. This would make the Greek army a force to be reckoned with, which would be just in time as the Crimean War starts in 1853, in which Britain, France, and the Ottomans would fight against the Russian Empire. Now here, Greece would actually do something unexpected and would join the British and French. You would be asking right now, why would the Greeks join them? Why didn't Greece just join Russia? Well, this would be due to Britain and France. Greece would be incapable of fighting the two, or even the Ottomans for this matter, so they joined them instead, but wouldn't contribute too much. This would allow them to get war reparations from Russia and would put them in Britain and France's goodwill. As the 1860s approached, Greece's military would have completed its modernization and would now have a similar strength to Italy, which wouldn't be good, but it also wouldn't be horrible. To help with further improvements in the army, a large army base would be opened up in Sparta. This would also serve a cultural goal, reflecting Sparta's historical role, while a large naval base would be opened up in Athens, reflecting its historical role. By the mid-1870s, this would allow Greece to have a military almost on par with the Ottomans, and this would be just in time, as after 1875, large-scale revolts would break out in the Balkans against Ottoman rule. Initially, the great powers minus Russia would support the Ottomans, but as more revolts break out and the Ottomans brutally suppress them, support for the Turks would gradually fade. After this, Russia would declare war on the Ottomans with the goal of liberating the Balkans from Turkish oppression. The Russians would start mopping the floor with the Ottomans, leading to Greece also joining in. Eventually, the great powers would get Greece and Russia to stop, and after a few treaties, peace would be secured. The peace deal would see Greece gain some Aegean islands, Crete, southern Epirus, and most importantly, Thessaloniki. The seizure of Thessaloniki would not only be extremely important due to its good port and geographic location, but also due to the fact that it is the birthplace of the future father of Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk. By taking Thessaloniki in 1879, just 2 years before Kemal's birth, the Greeks have unknowingly removed a major future rival. Kemal here probably wouldn't go in the military, and I honestly don't know what he would do, but I can certainly say he won't be in the history books anymore. His ideas of republicanism and secularism for the Turks would still exist, but without his guiding hand, I doubt that the future Republic of Turkey would even form. Now, as we continue into the 1880s and 90s, things would go normal. Greece here would integrate their conquered lands while also aiding the new Balkan states in modernizing. As the early 1900s start, Greece would increasingly start improving relations with Bulgaria, Serbia, and Montenegro, forming the Balkan League in 1908. The alliance would be aggressive and would look for any sign of Ottoman weakness to strike the Turks. That would come in 1911, with Italy going to war with the Ottomans over the fate of Libya, with the Italians winning by 1912. This would be the exact situation the Balkan League wanted, and they would declare war on the Ottomans, starting the First Balkan War. This war would see Greece gaining land all the way to the Maritsa River and most of the Aegean Islands, barring roads. Bulgaria here would gain far less land than they did in our own timeline, leading to them declaring war on Serbia and Greece, starting the Second Balkan War. Serbia and Greece would do well against Bulgaria, with the Ottomans and Romania soon joining in as well, leading to Bulgaria's surrender. By the end, Greece would receive most of western Thrace, except Adrianople, which would be reclaimed by the Ottomans. The following 2 years would be relatively peaceful, but then a certain Austrian would be shot in Sarajevo, leading to the First World War starting as it did in our own timeline. At the start, Greece would remain neutral, but as soon as the Ottomans and Bulgarians joined by early 1915, Greece would act. Even in our own timeline, Britain offered Greece Cyprus if they joined early, and with them doing so here, Greece would immediately get Cyprus. Greece would join the war, and immediately they, alongside the great powers, would plan the partition of the Ottoman Empire. It would be like it was historically, but Greece and Russia would clash over the question of Constantinople, with Russia threatening to leave the war if they didn't get the city. Due to this, Greece would back off for now, and the partition plan would be created. When Greece joins the war, Serbia, Montenegro, and Albania would have already fallen. Their retreating soldiers would immediately head to Greece, and the Greeks would be able to fortify their border, leading to Bulgaria failing to make any significant gains. In the sea, the Greek navy would commit to a naval landing on the Anatolian coast, and by late 1915, the Greeks would land in Ionia, but the Ottomans would manage to hold the line, leading to things slowing down in Anatolia. The war would go pretty much the same in the rest of Europe. In 1916, the Russians would launch the Brusilov offensive, which would be extremely successful, while the Greeks would start pushing into Bulgaria, eventually reaching Plovdiv by late 1916 as Bulgaria surrenders. The fall of Bulgaria would allow Greece to slowly liberate Albania and Serbia, while for now starting a small offensive in Ottoman Thrace. The Central Powers would realize that if they don't knock one of their enemies out now, then they would lose. This would result in Germany diverting some troops from the Western Front to the east as the combined Central Powers pounce on Russia, with Germany reaching Kiev by early 1917. This would allow the Germans to send Lenin into Russia, starting the Russian Civil War, which would result in Russia piecing out. But this victory would be at a cost, as the Allies made great gains on the Western Front while the Germans were busy. During this time, Serbia and Albania would be fully liberated, with Austria-Hungary having to divert its forces south to deal with this. This would finally allow Greece to continue its offensive into Thrace. By mid-1917, the Greeks would pour into Thrace, coming dangerously close to Constantinople. Under the weight of all this pressure, the Ottomans would crumble as the empire sues for peace. This would leave Germany and Austria-Hungary alone. Even this wouldn't last long, as Austria-Hungary collapses into revolution by mid-1917. This would leave the German Empire, who would be in an even worse position than they were in our own timeline. Also around this time, the Americans would join the war after the sinking of the Lusitania and the Zimmermann telegram. This would all result in Germany surrendering by late 1917, ending the Great War a year earlier. The peace deal that would be finalized would be as follows. The Treaty of Versailles would pretty much be identical to how it was in our own timeline. The Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye and Trianon would also mostly be the same, while the Treaty of Neuilly-sur-Seine that dealt with Bulgaria would be slightly different here. Greece, after a lot of diplomatic struggle, would manage to convince the great powers to allow it to annex land all the way to Burgos, making Greece even stronger. But that wouldn't be the end of it, as we now approach the Treaty of Sevres that dealt with the Ottoman Empire. Off the bat, the Middle East would pretty much be divided the same way as it was in our own timeline. In the Caucasus, Georgia and Armenia would see expansion, while a Kurdish state would be created by Britain and France for further influence in the region. Italy would gain some influence in southern Anatolia, while Greece would gain Thrace, the remaining Aegean islands, Ionia, Aeolus, Doris, Troad, and Mysia, while Constantinople would be demilitarized and occupied by the Allies for now. But this wouldn't last long, as the Turks would start their war of independence. But with Kemal not being here, the Turks wouldn't nearly perform that good. The aid from the Soviet Union would allow them to resist the Greeks and allies for a while, but eventually the Turks would lose. In the revised peace treaty, Turkey would actually manage to gain some land, as their annexation of Pontus would be recognized, but the thing they'd lose for that wouldn't make it worth it at all. The Turks would lose Constantinople, which would be given to the Greeks, as Greek soldiers entered the city after almost 500 years. They would restore order. This would be the greatest victory for the Greeks, with the Megali finally succeeding. The Turks in the city wouldn't be deported and would be allowed to stay. The Hagia Sophia would be once again turned into a cathedral, but places like the Blue Mosque would be allowed to remain for the Turks living in the city, but their language would be suppressed, with Greek being the only language of the state. Constantinople, though, wouldn't be turned into the capital, as it had lost its importance and instead would become the New York of Greece. Following this victory, there would be several parades around Greece, as Prime Minister Eleftheros Venizelos would declare the 19th of August as the National Restoration Day. Greece, due to their victory, would become the new Lion of the Balkans and would work together with Yugoslavia, Romania, and Kurdistan to contain a potential Turkish or Bulgarian invasion. Turkey here would probably not be the same due to the absence of Kemal, but whoever takes over would at least start partially modernizing the state. As we approach the 1920s, Greece would spend a decade rebuilding as its economy would improve, but as we enter 1933, things would get worse. In Germany, the funny mustache man would come to power, while in Italy, Mussolini would gradually start becoming more and more bold in his claims, with both successors of Rome continuously butting heads. Only time will tell if this all explodes into another great war. But for now, this was it for this video. If you liked it, please consider subscribing and leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I love reading them. But for now, this was Alternate History Chronicles, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.